take off your shoes and your socks and make fists with your toes.
Thanks, stereotypical 80s businessman. Is disassembling your gun relaxing as well? Way to make John's life way harder. Jokes aside, it's actually a genius way to make our hero vulnerable once the terror begins. And more sympathetic as a man afraid of flying.
California.
And thus begins one of the best things about Die Hard, John McClane's incessant internal dialogue spoken aloud. Standing in as our surrogate, constantly saying what we're thinking.
It's my first time driving a limo.
It's okay. It's my first time riding in one.
Kinda like a buddy cop movie, but they're both the inexperienced rookie of limo rides. But John sitting up front like this is the first in a long list of things that make him such a relatable everyman. Man, the color grading has to be on purpose. Or did LA in the 80s really have insane sunsets like this? A little Pink Mist type night foreshadowing? Christmas wrapping.
So your lady sees you, you run into each other's arms, the music comes up, and you live happily ever after, right?
Give or take a few dead terrorists and a shirt color change. Another great technique for getting us to relate to McClane is this first-person perspective, taking in the extravagance and Japanese design that's so foreign to him and us. And I don't know if I have any Frank Lloyd Wright fans in my audience, but this room is literally based on Falling Water.
Merry Christmas!
Sincere response from Bruce Willis.
I was just making a call.
Escobar didn't pick up. I'll try again later.
It's a Japanese company. They figure a married woman's got...
You are a married woman, Holly.
Also, fun fact, in a way she could have squashed this argument, Japanese men often take their wife's surname, depending on the situation.
The magic, then back to Worthy, right?
Murder jokes. I have this feeling like this comes up a lot in this movie. And just in case you don't accept this movie as a Christmas movie, here's some stepped down, slowed down sections of Ode to Joy intermingled with the score. Which, by the way, took me way too long to remember the name of. Shazam didn't know, my wife was convinced it was some song about angels, I eventually had to hum it via text for my sister-in-law. So classical music lessons for me. Ooh, Alan Rickman is always a win. He doesn't even need to say anything, just strut.
Where is Mr. Takagi?
What's an easy way to make sure we for sure hate Hans? Make him a tad racist. He's obviously seen Takagi's picture, so this little charade is to say all Japanese men look alike, which is racist, but he's a bad guy. And he garners just about the same amount of hate with that little judgmental glance. Oh, Alan, we miss you and your evil, evil ways.
Nice suit. John Phillips, London.
Compliments. Also the first hint that there's more to Hans than political activism.
What kind of terrorists are you? Who said we were terrorists?
Also that, I suppose. But that's amazing, and I'll get into it more in the conclusion, but it's an expectation subversion. That would have been an easy twist to hold on to as a mystery box, but it plays much better with us knowing up front. And maybe I have to take back the racist comment. Gotta give Hans credit for his diverse hiring practices. Black hacker, German electrician slash lumberjacks, Italian, I don't know, goon? Asian demolition guy? He speaks French to this kid in the end.
Didn't you stop him, John? Because then you'd be dead too.
Preempting the nitpickers before nitpickers took over Reddit. Well, before Reddit. Also the internet.
I promise I won't hurt you.
No, they're friendship bullets. All right, I thought this was an action movie. Let's get some brawling. And something tells me this wasn't all that choreographed. Chekhov's Zippo. They thought of everything. I'd excuse John for not trying on the shoes, cause adrenaline, you know? But he's always trying to be prepared as he can be, collecting resources and information.
Alas, your Mr. Takagi did not see it that way, so he won't be joining us for the rest of his life.
More murder jokes. So, if Emilio Estevez had just ducked...
Still have a chance we might be able to get out of here.
Tell that to Takagi.
Okay, I have to start a murder joke counter. That makes 6 if you include ho 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 written in blood, which of course you do. Also the fact that Theo and Carl clearly had a bet going on whether Hans would have to kill Takagi.
I told you. It's not over yet.
And you know what? This technically classifies as a tasteless murder joke of sorts as well.
Pearl Harbor didn't work out, so we got you with tape decks.
This channel is reserved for emergency calls only.
No lady, do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza?
Appropriate reaction. I like this step back, establishing Carl Winslow's location in relation to 75 cents for a gallon of gas. Ugh, the 80s went so hard. Ingenuity. So many 80s high-profile thieves had such amazing flowing hair. Avant-garde photography landmarking. Whew. Superhuman finger muscles to the rescue. And fun fact, the stuntman actually fell. He was supposed to grab the first sledge, but they liked the way it looked and they used it anyway. Oh, and the stuntman was fine. Chekhov's Zippo going off. which created one of the most iconic images ever. It was also my first instinct for a thumbnail, for the record. There's claustrophobia, and then there's trapped in an air duct with a tow-headed German preparing to machine gun you if you make a sound or are in any way heavier than aluminum. Teamwork's teamwork, right? Even if it's bad guy teamwork?
Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate. Thanks for the advice. Let it slow.
Generosity.
Welcome to the party, pal!
That guy was already dead, so... not technically a murder joke, but I'll let it slide. Standpoint, John. Jokes are for right after you kill someone. Also, yup.
You and Carl and Franco might be a little lonely, so I wanted to give you a call. How does he know so much about this?
Love the knee-jerk reaction of the uninitiated, the simple man. Exactly the response John would want them to have, which is abruptly cut off by Hans's more controlled and playful response.
Yeah, I'm still here. Unless you want to open the front door for me.
Again, showing how intelligent he is, John would never leave Holly behind, but he's better off having Hans think he would just assume peace out of there.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, mother...
And that one of the most iconic lines was born of the banter about which cowboy John thought himself and was just sarcasm. It bridges the gap between the bygone Western films and modern action movies. And fun fact, Bruce never thought it would make it into the final cut.
Missiles, automatic weapons, and enough plastic explosives to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Tell that to Dutch, because John McTiernan also directed Predator. Or John Matrix, because Steven D'Souza also wrote Commando. I just wanted to say John Matrix. Another scene where we relate to John as he finally gets to take a little break and have a smoke. But don't smoke, kids. I guess unless you steal French cigarettes off a dead German while stopping a heist. In that case, I guess you can make an exception.
I don't think so, sir. In fact, I think he's a cop. Like being able to spot a phony ID.
Intuition win for Powell.
What's it look like? We're going in. All we know is that somebody shot your car up. It's probably the same silly son of a you've been talking to on that radio.
Cops are usually morons in movies like this, especially in the 80s, and Sipowicz is even worse in the next movie. But this is actually a believable conflict and conclusion, and it's no mistake that it's exactly what Hans wants. This cop just learned a valuable truth about roses. So botany lessons. Man, they took their time setting up in the 80s. It's a couple minutes just to get this rocket launcher in place. But this explosion is amazing, and the time and effort and layering of practical effects is what made it so.
Oh my god, the quarterback is toast!
I don't know much about how the electrical charge actually has to work, but it seems to me extra detonators plus unplugged CRT monitor, which I feel like used to hold a current for a while after being unplugged, plus crappy rolling desk chair plus elevator shaft equals boom. So, C4 lessons.
Well, I got some bad news for you, Dwayne. From up here, it doesn't look like you're in charge of Jack.
Poor Vernon. Can't control unruly kids in detention, can't stop crazy terrorists from murdering people or badass New York cops from spraying everyone with glass.
Who gives a shit about glass?
I negotiate $1 million deals for breakfast. I think I can handle this Euro trash.
Takagi was a little sad to see die, but him I can live without.
Frickin' talk.
It pains me to say that I am a fan of his beard, though. Reluctant, beautiful beard win. My goodness, I love the way the dialogue is shot with people talking over the radio framed as if they're having a conversation sitting across from each other. Even going so far as to have John talk over his shoulder at Ellis when he gets on the mic as if he's butting into a conversation he shouldn't be in, which is exactly what John tries to convey, and then finally turn around to talk to him.
Hans, this asshole is not my friend. I just met him tonight. I don't know him. These people are gonna kill you. Tell them you don't know me.
Though I do give John credit for trying to save the life of the slimy coke addict who was clearly hitting on his wife.
I read about them in Time magazine.
How can you not love fake political terrorists?
Helsinki syndrome.
As in Helsinki, Sweden.
Finland.
He could have used a location title card there. But what a terrible psychologist. He clearly meant Oslo syndrome. And while Hans is still dressed really well, it's so perfect that his hair falls down in front of his face like that, making him look less like a Euro trash terrorist and more doofy, scared weasel. Also adaptability. Which leads to one of the most stressful situations in the movie where the camera makes you feel a little sick. Cat and mouse, spy versus spy, two super smart dudes playing a game of chess, with my old friend and nemesis, the Dutch tilt. Reaffirming what we already know, that something is off. But who is ahead of whom?
Please, God, no, you're one of them, aren't you?
And Hans' American accent isn't too bad.
You gotta be on fucking TV with that accent.
I don't know if I go that far. Oh, double brutal. Hot dang, one of the most chaotic action sequences. And obviously Hans gets a quick thinking win.
Shoot the glass. Now, Carl, you're back in business.
Carl rejects your offer to smile.
I shot a kid.
Let's be honest, Urkel had it coming.
89. Alright, well, what about the guy he boomerangs in Crocodile Dundee?
not a kid. Whatever. You know, I don't think Friedrich Schiller or Beethoven had stealing hundreds of millions of dollars in bearer bonds when he wrote Ode to Joy. But it's probably pretty joyful for the thieves.
Merry Christmas. By the time they figure out what went wrong, we'll be sitting on a beach earning 20%.
So that line had to be written before Black Monday. Or actually, I don't know. What was the DAX like in the 80s? Man, these are niche references. Where are my German investor viewers born in the 60s at?
She's heard me say I love you 1,000 times. She never heard me say I'm sorry.
If you didn't think a full-tilt action film would be a place to see a hard-as-nails, terrorist-slaying badass say sweet things about his wife and have a little introspection on his marital failings, you'd be wrong. And this is such a powerful statement about masculinity and being a man's man. The whole movie is really about John reclaiming his manliness, but it culminates for him in an apology to his wife and acceptance of her success.
You let me in right now, or I call the INS. Comprende? This is the last time these kids are gonna have to speak to their parents.
Is there like a deleted scene where this guy gets thrown off a building? No? Should be. It's actually amazing how unceremoniously his brother went out, quick neck snap, but because John had to make a murder joke, he created a nemesis that's been building the entire film. So many twists and turns. I mean, not for us, but for the characters.
Lose 20-25% of the hostages. Tops. I can live with that.
It's almost like you guys want to die, which is fine. I want you to die. Almost more than that time you tried to blend a Goonie.
After all your posturing, all your little speeches, you're nothing but a common thief.
It's interesting that Holly is able to shake Hans with that one line. He's been a man who's calm and collected, even cordial before a murder. Something I missed prior to this very viewing is the ridiculous posturing done by Hans.
When Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
He wants so badly to fit in with these titans. Yet he not only misquotes Plutarch, from what I understand, he misses the point entirely. Alexander wept because there were infinite worlds and he couldn't even conquer his own. The truth is that Hans's interpretation is the perception he wants people to have of him. Yet the actual meaning is the reality. He's conquered nothing. Die hard, guys. Die hard.
Common thief.
I am an exceptional thief.
Still, facts and honesty. Come on, Bruce. You're supposed to be hunting down the cannibal, not endorsing people eating. Brutal resourcefulness. Brute sourcefulness.
Oh, John, what the f are you doing?
Still showing that classic McClane introspection about how ridiculous the fire hose plan is. Oh man, it just doesn't end for John McClane. One of the most tense action set pieces from this century.
Gonna need some more FBI guys, I guess.
I thought I didn't like you. Argyle doing his part. Badass good guy. What a shot. The backlighting and sparks raining down the low angle camera. John's limping, making him have an appropriately western saunter.
You're a pretty good cowboy yourself, Hans.
He does, in a few years. Anti-stormtrooper aim.
Happy trails, Hans.
Such an awesome slow-mo build-up. And John finally got to see the Rolex.
Show him the watch. It's a Rolex.
You know, the symbol of her choice to leave John and focus on her career being the very thing about to pull her to her death. Didn't think you'd get a hidden metaphor from a big dumb summer blockbuster, did ya? And then the expression change on Hans's face, which was entirely genuine since they released him faster than expected for his 70-foot drop. Snow in LA on Christmas after all. Hugging. And it all worked out in the end. Powell got to murder someone again. Someone about whom you could say really wanted to die not easy. Comeuppance.
This is their idea of Christmas. I gotta be here for New Year's.
Nah, he's more into Christmas disasters. What can really be said about one of the greatest action films of all time? You guys chose it by over 50% out of 5 choices, so that's something. It's amazing the things they got right in this film and how they amplified so many of the wrong things in the sequels. I'm not saying I don't enjoy them all for what they are, but some of them are not Die Hard movies if we're defining Die Hard movies by what makes this movie amazing. Things like,
Well, to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
But for me, there are 2 primary things that make this movie work. The first is the antagonist, the second is the protagonist, and yeah, the guy on screen corresponds to each. Hans is actually the protagonist. He sets everything in motion. It's his plan. McClane is the one messing everything up for him. Our antagonist is the everyday New York cop in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's not a hero yet, just a guy at a party with a struggling marriage and intolerance for bad guys and a love for westerns and one-liners. He's me, or rather, he's us. All of us. He's a fantasy that seems attainable because he bleeds. A lot. Then you have the protagonists, who happen to be villains and are these seriously evil, murderous sociopaths and a few psychopaths. But since they're not actually terrorists in the practical political sense, just thieves, you also kind of laugh with them and at them. And Hans thinks himself more a Bond villain than a common crook. He's polite, even before murder. And they pretty much almost pull off an Ocean's 11 scale heist if it wasn't for that meddling cop. And the way Hans and John play off each other is fantastic. I talked about some of the tense scenes throughout, but one of the main things that makes this movie so enjoyable is the narrative perspective. It's basically third-person omniscient. A lot of the film is from John's perspective, but we constantly get breaks to see what everyone else is doing. Even Argyle. Have you ever noticed that we learn almost every bit of information before the affected characters do? This scene is one of the few exceptions, but based on John's calm and commanding attitude, we know he knows. We know there's no bullets in that gun. Oops. Otherwise, we're explicitly told things. We know about the gun behind his back, about the explosives on the roof, we know Ellis is a dead man, even right down to the thieves' plan to exploit the FBI's playbook. So while sometimes it's a tense and stressful nail-biter, it often feels like a video game with God mode on. Granted, John has his struggles and close calls, but the way he achieves success early on kind of alleviates the tension of danger to his life, and we're along for the ride. And then there's the details. Our hero spends the entire movie without shoes. That simple fact is enough to make this movie a special classic. A Christmas classic. But there's so much more. The continuity of this film blows me away. The sun slowly sets from John's ride in the limo until Hans arrives, and it was expertly planned out, even using a blurry matte backdrop in Holly's office. John's tank top progressively gets filthier and filthier from sweat and blood and crawling around in elevator shafts until he finally goes to the air duct system and fully trashes it, which anyone who's been in or taken apart forced air duct work, as I have, can attest to. It's disgusting. Or simply John's bloody footprints on the glass since they're still bleeding. He limps, he's bleeding, he's about to keel over by the end. I guess I hadn't really watched this film with a critical eye before. I always thought it was a classic because it was a one-of-a-kind, fun action movie with great performances. Which it is. But it's also brilliantly written, shot, and composed. The story is paced in a way that gives us and John a chance to catch our breath while learning about the characters. For a movie that everyone remembers as a crazy non-stop action movie, it's almost 20 minutes before the first guy gets shot. Half an hour before anyone important. That's terrible. Sorry, elevator operator guy. And then the camera movement throughout plays so perfectly into whatever emotion you're feeling. From the first person or over the shoulder stuff to these pan and zoom reaction shots. Some that work great, some that are so goofy they also work. I've heard that McTiernan's commentary track is amazing, and I can only imagine he expounds on all this, since he clearly designed it that way. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it to play back on my version of the Blu-ray, even though it claims it's in there. But every shot flows together in this sing-songy yet logical way that always keeps a solid point of focus and is so pleasing to watch. Just not what I expected when I started dissecting this film. And then the unknown cast. Bruce Willis was not even the third choice for this action movie. He was seen as a comedic actor, which worked out great, by the way.
I know what a TV dinner feels like.
But was still relatively unknown in the mid-80s. The studio wanted Sly Stallone, Arnold, or a typical action hero. In a lot of ways, the casting of Bruce Willis with his dad bod, receding hairline, and overall beaten-down demeanor was a statement opposed to the 80s action hero. Especially given that he was cast against a bunch of pretty Eurotrash, more typical-looking action heroes as the bad guys. In fact, he spends the entire first half of the movie trying to get help.
Argyle, tell me you heard the shots. You're calling the police right now.
That's not Rambo-esque, but it's what a real person would do. And boy, did someone bet right on Bruce. He created a new action hero, and his dramatic moments talking about his wife actually get you right in the feels. Rickman was also basically an unknown in Hollywood. It's hard to imagine now that he hadn't honed this bad guy on a dozen other films. There really are no weak links in this movie. Even the sleazeball Ellis, played by Hart Bachner, nailed his role, creating one of the most quotable lines in the film.
Hans. Bobby.
And at some point, I'd like to hear the story of how Holly ended up marrying Coach and giving birth to Lorelai Gilmore. I guess I had more to say about Die Hard than I thought. Even I didn't realize it was this much more than a silly action movie. Silly Christmas movie. Christmas in LA. I don't know how you people Christmas without cold and snow. But if Die Hard is to be believed, you're doing some things right. Next week, a movie people were divided on, but not as much as they're divided on that one that just came out. Looking forward to the death threats when it comes time to tackle that one. Merry Christmas, Die Hard fans.
It's Christmas, Theo. It's the time of miracles.
Ha ha ha!